Awesome. I think we can get started now. Welcome, everyone. Glad you could join us today for our 1 hour webinar, Boost Accounts Payable Productivity Using Cost Cutting and Operational Efficiency. I'm Sam Maxwell, part of the marketing team here at MHC, and I'll be facilitating today's discussion. Our speaker is Mary Schaeffer, who I'll be introducing shortly. First, just wanted to quickly go over several housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, and attendees will receive a follow-up email with the link to a recording on our website. All participants are muted to prevent background noise, so please type any questions you might have into the Q&A section. There will also be a post-webinar survey that will appear when the webinar ends. Please use the survey to let us know how we're doing and to request any additional information so an MHC resource can follow up with you. We really appreciate that feedback. Awesome. Mary, if you want to just jump to the next slide for me.
Sure.
Oh, perfect. There you go. And before I hand it off to Mary, for those of you not familiar with MHC, we help organizations tackle digital transformation with speed and confidence using our solutions to automate the capture, transformation, and communication of paper and digital documents across core business processes. Our flexible end-to-end automation platform helps users eliminate tedious procure-to-pay and order-to-cash tasks, increase efficiency, achieve operational excellence goals, and strengthen relationships with customers and vendors. And now to introduce our speaker today. So with us, we have Mary Schaeffer, the AP Now's founder. She's been creating content around the AP function for over 20 years. She served on the Business Payments Coalition and Federal Reserve's Remittance Delivery Assessment Work Group, and is currently a member of the NACHA ACH Network Advisory Panel. She's also been named a top AP influencer for the last 3 years by the prestigious AP Association, which is a global organization headquartered in the UK. And then before founding AP Now, she worked in corporate finance and treasury for Continental Grain, Equitable Life, which is now AXA, and ONY. Awesome. So Mary, I will pass it off to you.
Okay, thanks. And thanks to MHC for inviting me, and thanks for all of you for coming to hear me talk about accounts payable, productivity, and all that sort of stuff. I love to talk about accounts payable, and I'm always thrilled when I have an audience who's willing to sit and talk about it. So I've broken today's talk down into two rough areas. We're going to spend most of the time on the first part, talking about the issues that we have and some 17 tactics that I think you can use to help you become a more efficient, effective, and by effective, I mean cost-effective, encompassing other areas as well, accounts payable function. Now, obviously, not all 17 of them are going to work for every single person. Some of you are probably using some of them already, and a few of them you might not be able to use for a variety of reasons, okay? And then we're going to talk about deploying the tactics. But what I hope is that you've either printed out the handout, the slide deck, or you have a little piece of paper on the side of your desk where you can jot down the few things that I talk about today that you think you might be able to implement in your own organization to become more efficient, effective, etc. Okay, and with that, Sam, we have our first polling question, and guys, it's right in front of us now. What percentage of invoices that you receive are duplicates? And when I talk about duplicates, I'm talking about duplicates that come in before the due date. So, you know, your vendor's just trying to nudge you or maybe get you to pay twice. I don't know. It depends upon what you think. Okay, and I'm watching as the numbers pop through here, and I can see that 33% of you have said that you have less than 5%, and then another 44% said between 6 and 15%. Typically, when I do this and I ask this question at a lot of groups, the numbers come in at about 25%. So you've got a little bit less than many other groups have. but you can still see that it is an issue. I'm trying to close this out. Okay. Oh, I guess, Sam, I guess you have to do it. It won't let me close it out.
Yeah, you should be able to just exit out now.
Okay. All right. All right. There. So another technology challenge, if you will. Okay. So let's start off with the dilemma that most of us are facing. In most accounts payable functions and in all business functions, I don't mean to make it sound like accounts payable has it any worse than any other function or any other accounting function within the organization, but most of us are under pressure. We need to be more productive. Management is expecting that we're taking advantage of technology, and they believe that this should save, a lot of headcount, a lot of manual work. And sometimes they've got an inflated opinion as to how much that should save. But at the same time, companies are looking to cut costs. So if you're working in the accounts payable function, you know that yes, technology does help, and it helps a lot, but at the same time, we're having more and more work thrown at us, and nobody's giving us extra resources to deal with that. So the hope is that you can take some of the productivity savings from an automation product that you may buy and use that to handle all this other work, because very few organizations are saying, okay, yeah, you know what? Yes, I understand accounts payable department. You have all this extra work. And yes, we'll give you extra help. And I want to talk a little bit about what that extra work is. So we're talking about, everybody's looking to cut costs, and I get it. Trust me, I like to save money just as much as the next guy, but we've got a lot of extra work showing up in accounts payable. So those duplicate copies of invoices that I was talking about, even if you're only getting 5% of your invoices are coming in, they're duplicates that are being sent because your suppliers are sending invoices to two people, that's 5% extra work to weed them out. And if you don't weed them out, then you either do the whole processing routine, which is not a good use of your resources, and then they get weeded out at the end when you do your duplicate payment checking, or worst case, you make a duplicate payment, and then you're at either the mercy of your supplier to return that duplicate payment, which most of them don't, by the way, and or they issue a credit, and then you have to find the credits and you have to use the credits. Bottom line, a lot more work. So we've got to you really want to hone in on those duplicate copies of invoices, because it's not only the work associated with weeding them out, it's also the fact that if a few slip through, you're going to make duplicate payments, and then that's more work and worse money right out the door, right off your bottom line. Fraud protection has become a huge issue, unfortunately. It's always important, but criminals are getting smarter and smarter, and they're continually finding new ways to maneuver and wiggle in and to get their hands on your money, to be perfectly honest. And the speed at which they develop these new approaches is phenomenal. So we have to be on top of it. Now, there were some statistics that were published by the Association of Financial Professionals, and what that showed was that 61% of all these new electronic frauds, of which there are many, were being directed directly at the accounts payable team, with another 14% going at Treasury. So between the two groups, you've got 75% of these fraud attempts all focused on these folks. And it takes a little bit of time and effort to make sure you weed them out, to analyze, hey, is this a fraudulent transaction, to make the necessary calls to verify, to make sure it's legitimate or not. And again, no one is increasing staff. No one has said, hey, accounts payable, we understand you're getting all these emails asking you to make a change of bank account on a particular account where you're paying somebody with an ACH, and you have to call up and verify, and it might take 10 minutes, it might take 15 minutes, it might take you an hour to track down the right person. And most of the time when you call, they say, yes, it's fine. But, those one or two times when it's not fine, you've now saved the organization. You haven't sent $1 million, let's say, to somebody who was not entitled to get it. So all that's an increase in the work that your staff has to do in accounts payable, but nobody's going out and hiring more staff in accounts payable, or at least no company that I know of. And if there are only a few. Along the same lines, we're also seeing an increase in regulatory compliance efforts required across the board. This is not only in accounts payable. I don't want to make it seem like, accounts payable is, put upon, but about 75% of all accounts payable departments issue the 1099s for their organizations every January, which is, a real treat. And what we're seeing is that the IRS, as it does with many things, continually changes the rules, changes what you have to do. That's fine. But now we're also seeing that in addition to these annual changes that are coming along and this reporting that, used to be on one form, the 1099 MISC, now it's on the 1099 MISC and the 1099 NEC. Now we're also seeing individual states having 1099 reporting requirements. So this, has the potential to, make the work 50 times as much if you're dealing with all 50 states, but 50 states, yeah, but probably most of you aren't. So a lot more effort into regulatory compliance. The other issue on that end is that while technology helps us all become more efficient, it's also helping the regulators become more efficient when they're auditing. So lots more work, but not much staff. So any savings that you can get in personnel by an automation solution will be well worth it. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, there is a disconnect, if you will, between the reality of automating your invoice processing or your accounts payable function, if you will, and what management assumes it will be. And, management assumes, you'll get the solution and it will take care of almost all the work. And so what's the problem? And, the answer is it takes care of a lot of the manual transactional type work, but it does not take care of everything. And it certainly doesn't take care of the additional tasks that I was talking about on the other slide. So there's a disconnect between what it can do and will do. And that is great, by the way. I don't mean to play it down, but it's not the be all end all, and you can get rid of your whole accounts payable staff now because you have this wonderful solution. It just makes them more effective and more efficient. Okay, so this is the world we live in today. And I've got 17 strategies, if you will, that will help you whittle away at this issue. I call these strategies in the parlance of baseball, if you will, singles, okay? I don't have any one thing that I'm going to tell you that I think will be the silver bullet and will magically make all your operational issues go away, but they will eat away at it so that you will become more effective and more efficient. And when you become more effective and more efficient, by the way, that's a savings for your company, even though you can't delineate it. There's no line on the balance sheet or income statement that says savings due to a more efficient accounts payable function. Doesn't say that about any function, okay? So we're going to, go through our 17 strategies. Some of them you may already have be doing. Some of them you won't. Some of them you won't be able to do for a variety of reasons, but a few of them you should be able to. So make your list and let's get going. Okay, the 17 tactics. But before we do that, let's take a look at what percentage of your payments are still being made with paper checks. And I'm really interested, Sam, to see what this is. You think we're going to have any less than 10%? All righty. So we actually do have some under 10%. I am so impressed. Of course, if that person is a European company, a little less so, because they do a much better job than we do as far as getting electronic payments. Okay, so you can see here that well over half of your payments are still being made with paper checks. If you look at the statistics, more than 50%, 60% of you said that, and 7% were unsure. Okay. For those who are under 25%, it's about 20% of you. Congratulations. That is magnificent. Okay. Because paper checks are an extremely inefficient way of making payments, and they are also expensive. Now, people look at the paper check and they say 10 cents for the check, 10 cents for the envelope, whatever the postage is. And they say, hey, it costs around $1. No, it costs a lot more than that. And I'll spare you from ranting and raving about the true cost of a paper check. Okay, so tactic number one, strategy number one, that you can use to become more effective. And by the way, you should do this every 6 months or every year, because you'd be surprised how fast what you're doing becomes not best practice or just ordinary practice. So what you want to do is you want to sit down and you want to review your regular AP processes. Now, if you hire a new supervisor or a new manager, this is a perfect time to do it. Have them look at what's going on and have them, make suggestions. But you want to look at your processes. You want to see how you're doing. And then you want to go through, and are there any new best practices that you should incorporate into your process, even if it takes a little bit longer? And are there any things you're doing that are inefficient or that people have started to do that are inefficient that you need to weed out? So best case example of the new best practice that we weren't doing 5 years ago is we were not verifying these change of bank account emails. Okay, that takes time. If you got an email that was from the CFO or the CEO, some high-level executive, asking you to do a rush wire transfer, we were not going back and verifying that that was a legitimate request. And these are things that we now have to integrate into our processes, because we want to make sure we're not hit by fraud. That's the real reason we're doing them. So you want to make sure that all the best practices, the new best practices you're using. And if you're not using a certain best practice, you want to take a good hard look at it and try and figure out where you're at risk for not using it, and if you can start using it. Okay, strategy number 2. This involves entering invoice data. Even organizations that are almost completely automated will have to enter some invoice data, because let's face it, at the end of the day, there's always going to be a few suppliers who are going to send a paper invoice. We're not at the point where we've gotten completely away from that. And so when they enter this data, whatever it be, if it's an invoice data, or if it's setting up a vendor in the master vendor file, or making a change to a vendor information that's in the master vendor file, you want to have a very strong, standardized coding system for the way the data is entered. And the benefit of that is that if an invoice comes in today and you enter it, and then one of those awful invoices, duplicate copies of invoices comes in again, and it ends up on my desk and I go to enter it, I will immediately be able to figure out that it's a duplicate and discard it. So strong, standardized coding system that spells out everything. Yes, I understand it makes you look like a control freak, because you don't let people, do what they want to do. You don't let them be creative. But this is one of those areas where no creativity is desired or really should be tolerated. This is one of those things, do as I tell you to do. You don't like to be that person, but that's unfortunately, in this particular case, who you need to be. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is paper invoices. Okay, we want to, as much as possible, get rid of the paper, and this includes paper invoices. Now, many organizations are now emailing invoices, and I like to tell people that you want to encourage 100% emailed invoices if you can, for the following reasons. Number one, it doesn't get lost in the mail. And the US mail has gotten slower, and it's expensive. With an emailed invoice, you get the information and it comes in immediately. If you qualify for early payment discounts, it gives you a better shot of getting that invoice processed within the early payment discount period. And if you have an automation solution, if you have purchased one that can read invoices from email, then they can go ahead and get those emails entered. And this is the biggie for this, you don't have to do anything to discomfort your suppliers. Anytime you ask your suppliers to change the way they've been doing whatever they've been doing, you're going to have a problem. They're not all going to do it. They're going to do all sorts of different things. So if you can get everybody to email their invoices, whether you have an automation solution or not, your suppliers don't even have to know that you're using a solution, okay? All they know is they email their invoice. And as long as you can make sure that they only do it once, which I admit is easier said than done in some cases, you're good to go. So by getting emailed invoices, easier time with your automation solution, no invoices lost in the mail, etc. And then if for some reason an invoice is lost, you can just have it re-emailed. All right. I talked at the beginning, we had that first question. I did it on purpose. We talked about the duplicate copies of invoices. Your strategy, your tactic, if you should be, is to minimize them. In fact, completely eliminate them. I'd like to say completely eliminate, but this is the real world we live in. So I'll say minimize. And how do you do this? You need to talk to your vendors. You need to tell them, hey, we only need one copy of your invoice, and remind them that that invoice should be sent to the email address that you have set up to accept invoices. They should not be sending them to an individual. That individual can go on vacation, and then their invoice won't get submitted for a week or two, however long they're on vacation, or that person can leave. They can be absent unexpectedly. You want to point out when you talk to the vendors all the reasons why they should send it to that one email address and not wherever they think of, because remember, your vendors want one thing. They want to get paid, and they want to get paid quickly. So if you put it in terms that they can understand what's in it for them, then they are more apt to do it. So remind them, give them the email address you want them to send it to, and take it from there. Now, we talked about emailed invoices. I'm going to tell you that your processors will be much more effective if they have dual monitors, if they have two monitors. There will be absolutely no need for them to print the invoice before they process it, which is what was going on in a lot of companies. Your processors were getting the invoices, they were printing them out, which kind of gave back some of the advantage of having it emailed. Plus, it was adding another step of work that they didn't need to do. And so you want to discourage that. If they have two screens, it's very easy to do the data entry, have the invoice showing on one screen and the data entry system on the other. Now, I want to talk about invoices, and specifically small dollar invoices. While it's great that you get the invoices emailed, an even better solution is to get rid of the invoices completely. Now, obviously, you can't do that. You've got to, if you order something, you've got to pay for it, and people are going to send you an invoice because you're not going to give people cash to go out and spend. But for small dollar items, you can give people a P card, and you can let them use P cards to pay for these things. There's some hard dollar savings that you can actually quantify, unlike many of the other things which result in savings, but it's very difficult to quantify. These hard dollar savings come in two forms. Number one, you can calculate the hard dollar cost of a check, the envelope, what it costs to purchase the check, and the stamp. So let's say that's about $1. And then if you're getting rebates, that's additional money that's coming back. So you can actually calculate that dollar amount, and you can show why they should be using P cards, in addition to all the efficiency savings. You want your invoice processes to focus on verifying those large dollar invoices, those invoices that are thousands and thousands or hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. That's where you want them to put their focus. You don't want them to worry about this $125 invoice. Okay, that should not get the same attention that a much larger invoice gets. Now, we talked about eliminating paper. We talked about eliminating paper invoices. Now I'm going to tell you, you want to eliminate as many paper checks as possible. And across the US, according to NACHA, more than 50% of B2B payments are now not being made with paper checks. So this group is making a little bit more paper checks than the average company, if you will. Paper checks are expensive. In addition to the out-of-pocket costs, the people costs, the people processing costs are high, not only to produce the check, to mail the check, to reconcile the bank account, to follow up on uncashed checks. You get where I'm going. There are a lot of very manual, people intensive, and it's not value add work. So you want to eliminate these checks by trying to convince your vendors to accept ACH payment. And you want to also look at P cards for your small dollar items, which we've already talked about. And again, you can calculate the hard dollar savings because your ACH is probably going to cost you between 10 and 20 cents an item versus that hard dollar cost of at least $1 a check, but a lot more when you put the people costs in. It's also much easier to reconcile your bank account for ACH payments than checks, because ACH will settle either that day or the next day, depending upon whether you use traditional ACH or same day ACH, while the checks can string along for heaven only knows how long till they're finally cashed. Now, we don't think of this as a way to improve our bottom line, but training for your staff is critical, both new and old topics. I've kind of alluded to the fact that you need to train your staff about new frauds so that they can help protect you. But you also want to, anytime you have an upgrade, either on your ERP system, an automation solution, or any other product that you're using, you want to make sure everybody is trained on it. Sometimes with the upgrades, nobody thinks to train, and then people don't use the product correctly, and then there's errors creep in. You periodically want to do reviews. If you suspect that there are more errors being made than should be made, you might do a quick overview, a quick review. And all of this will go to reduce errors. And if you reduce errors, then that's less time spent on fixing the errors. If, let's say, it was a keying error, or if it was a duplicate payment that was made, trying to recover that money. So it may seem like training would be cost something, but in the end result is it's a cost saving. Now, I've already mentioned fraud. Fraud training is especially important. With a lot of frauds, I call it the silver bullet, because if your people know that a particular fraud is going on, then that is enough information for them that they'll recognize the fraud when they're presented with it. So, for example, a few years ago, there was a gift card fraud making the rounds. And as soon as people knew that there was this gift card fraud going on, if they got an email, a fraudulent one as it turned out, no matter how good it looked, supposedly from the CFO, that said it was fraudulent, that said it involved gift cards, their antennas went up and they said, oh, this is probably one of those fraudulent ones. So fraud training for everyone, because, when we look at the statistics as to who is targeted, it's everyone right up and down the train, not just your managers, not just your supervisors or your, vice presidents. They go after anybody who they can get to help them. And the other thing is, when you hear about frauds, this is one of those times when time is of the essence. As soon as you hear about the fraud, you need to share the information with everyone. Because if you say, well, I'll wait till we have the staff meeting at the end of the month, between now and the end of the month, a number of your people could have been targeted with this, whatever this new fraud is. So you need to update everyone immediately. The next thing that accounts payable can do is they can produce a lot of analytical data for other departments. Accounts payable has access to a wealth of information that can be used with other folks. So, for example, you might work with your procurement team to look for situations where they might be able to get a quantity discount, where they might qualify for a quantity discount. So if you're using like widget A, whatever widget A is, and it's being bought by several different locations, you might, if you combine those orders all with one, then the company might qualify for a lower price because of the quantity, instead of each of the individual units going out and operating as though they were a standalone. You might get quantity discounts. That's one thing that you can do. The same thing is if they were all ordering widget A and they were ordering from 2 or 3 different locations or 2 or 3 different suppliers, and you can see if one of them had a lower price than the others, you might want to, again, group the purchases for that location to get the lower price and get the lower price, whether there was a quantity discount involved or not. Okay, I want to talk about travel. Travel is one of those areas where money seeps right out of the company, and very difficult to pinpoint. So what you want to do here is you want to start out with a detailed written policy, a travel policy, and it should be very detailed so that there can be no mistakes and nobody can misinterpret, because you could be guaranteed if there's an area where somebody might make a mistake, might look at something and see it, a different way, they will find it. If something can be read one of 2 ways, even though you think it's pretty obvious that it says A, you can be guaranteed you'll have an employee who thinks it says B, if B is to their benefit. So make it really detailed. You want to update it regularly. We saw how important that was when COVID hit and everybody went remote. And you want to spell out the details, especially if you have areas where there's abuse. So, for example, if your organization has a policy that says they won't reimburse for liquor, okay? And then you start to see people putting in for wine and beer. And you're like, that's liquor, okay? And you talk to them and they'll be like, oh, we always have wine with our meals. I don't consider it alcohol. Well, it is alcohol. Okay. And so then you might need to spell that out in a little bit more detail, even though probably everybody listening to this would be thinking, no, that shouldn't be necessary. You're right. It shouldn't be, but it is. So if you find an area where there appears to be abuse, then you want to go back and tighten up the wording in your policy. Now, along the same lines, I want to talk about enforcing the policy uniformly across the board. I realize that when the policy is not enforced uniformly, it is typically beyond the control of either accounts payable or those in accounting to do this. But what you want to do as much as you can, as much as influence as you have on this topic, is push for uniform enforcement with no exceptions. Because when there's an exception, people think, well, we'll let so-and-so do such and such and no one will ever know. Yeah, word gets out. Trust me when I tell you, people talk and they'll talk about who got what. And when one person gets something, like let me go back to my no alcohol policy, and somebody puts in for a glass of wine and that is tolerated, then other people will say, well, if he got a glass of wine, why not me? And it builds from there. Also, there have been studies and there are statistics that show that when you enforce the policy uniformly for everybody across the board, that you have greater adherence to your policies in other areas. people turn in their expense reports more on time, a greater number of them, etc. So 100% uniform policy adherence. Now, I want to talk about receipts. What you want to do is, in general, when it comes to travel, we collect a lot of receipts. Many companies collect all receipts, and many companies also collect the detailed meal receipt, okay? Just because I'm telling you to collect these receipts doesn't mean that you have to check every single receipt. And by the way, if you're not checking all the receipts, which I highly recommend you don't, your employees don't need to know this. Your travelers do not need to know that, hey, they're not checking all the receipts. So you collect all the receipts and then you spot check them. How do you do that? Well, you collect all the receipts and then you randomly select 5 to 10%. In addition to that, you also check receipts or check on expense reports over a certain level, at a high level, and you periodically change that level. So your employees may know that you're spot checking all except for expense reports over 10,000. So they're very careful to make sure that they put in expense reports that are under 10,000. We'll periodically drop that to 88,000 or 8,500, and you may pick up people playing games. Okay, now the next tactic that I'm going to suggest may seem like adding work, but I promise you this isn't adding work. What you want to do is anytime you make a duplicate payment and you identify it, you want to research it. You want to figure out, hey, what happened that this duplicate slipped through and we made the payment? And when you figure out what happened, then you want to take a second look and say, okay, such and such happened. Was this a one-off and it happened because whatever, or is this something that is likely to happen more frequently? And if you think it's likely to happen more frequently, then you need to go and fix whatever the problem was. Also, when you identify that root cause, if you can, and you may not always be able to, go back and see if you made other duplicate payments because of this particular problem. Because remember, suppliers do not always return duplicate payments. In fact, they rarely do. Many of them will give you a credit, but sometimes those vendor credits get lost. So better not to make the duplicate payment at all. Okay, so research it and fix whatever the problem was. Okay, so this group, along with most of the rest of corporate America, by the way, is still printing a lot of checks, a lot of paper checks. This task is non-value added, okay? And many of you, especially if there's backup and you got to get a manual signature on it, it's a royal non-value add, people-intensive paper task. And you don't really get anything of it. So if you've done a good job with your internal controls and they're all upfront as they should be, consider outsourcing this task to the banks. Banks do this really well. They have a lot of experience doing it. They know what they're doing, so let them do it, okay? Because it's a non-value add task and it doesn't add anything to your plate. So if you're only printing a few checks, it doesn't matter. But most of us, as we saw from the statistics earlier, are printing a lot of them. So consider having your bank do it. And by the way, yes, they will charge for this, but it's money well spent. Let me see something. This slide seems not yet. No. Okay. So the next thing that I want to talk about is when you get an invoice that doesn't have a purchase order number or the name of a requisitioner on it, what to do with it. Now, what the standard practice is that the accounts payable department takes that invoice and then tries to figure out who placed the order so they know who to send the invoice to get approval. And I cannot tell you the time that I've seen wasted on this particular task. So what I'm going to suggest to you is you take that invoice and you create a standard letter or email. When I say letter, I really mean letter or email, depending upon whether you got a paper invoice through the mail or an email. And the email or the letter goes like this: Dear Mr. Ms. Supplier, in order to get you paid in a more timely manner, our company, ABC Company, requires that all invoices include a purchase order number or the name of a requisitioner. Please include that information and resubmit this invoice and then send it back to them. Now, you might be saying, especially if it was an email, wouldn't it be just easier for me to email them and get them to email the name of the requisitioner back? And yeah, it would be, honestly, but you're looking to solve this problem long-term, not just for this one particular invoice. So you want to invest a little bit of extra time and get them to do this. And so you want to do this. Now, do you think this works? I've been recommending this strategy for years, and I wrote about it in our free weekly e-zine. It goes out twice a week, actually. And I got a note back from one of my readers, and she said, I was so glad when I saw you recommending that people do this. She said, at my old company, which by the way was a European company, the management team came over from Europe and they told us we were going to do it. And she said, I thought it was the worst thing that I had ever heard. I thought they don't understand how we do things over here. And she refused to be part of it, so much so that when the letter went out, her name did not go on it because she thought suppliers were going to be offended by it. Suppliers were not offended by it. All they want to do is get paid. Remember, that's what they want. That's their goal, to get paid as quickly as possible. And she said within 3 months, they had 100% compliance. So, and nobody complained, by the way. They just put the information on the invoices and away they went. So if you think this wouldn't work, I'm here to share with you, as long as you're polite and you don't insult anybody, this can be a win-win for everybody. You don't waste the time running around trying to figure out who it is, and they get paid in a more timely manner. So don't process those invoices, return them. And I want to go back one more minute. Don't forget that some of those invoices that come in like that will be fraudulent, no matter how good they look. It's just somebody trying to scam you. So another side benefit from your approach. Now, the last tactic that I want to talk about is what I call intelligent invoice automation or intelligent accounts payable automation, okay? There's no two ways about it. It's going to take away some of the manual processing efforts that are going on in your organization. You won't have to devote as much human resources to this transactional type work. It's not going to be a little robot sitting in the desk next to you, but it will be an automation solution. They are cost effective, they're user friendly, and it's the wave of the future. I don't know how else to tell you this, but this is where we're going. And with all this other extra work that we talked about at the beginning of this talk today, it's going to be a blessing because it'll free up some human efforts to work on some of these other things that we've talked about. And we have not even talked about, any of the projects that you may have that you want to do that you just don't have time for. Going through a period, Sam and I were talking before, where a lot of technology is coming into the business world, into the accounts payable function. And this is one of those areas where accounts payable is leading the charge. I've seen a number of talks on automation in the business world, automation in the accounting space. And inevitably, the first example that they always give is the automating the invoice processing. Some other examples that always come up at the beginning is cash application, expense reporting. Okay, so it's the wave of the future. Embrace it, and then use those extra human resources that you've managed to free up to handle some of the many other tactics that we've been talking about. Okay, now probably should have asked this a little earlier, but polling question number 3, Sam. have you outsourced the processing of your checks? And I am very interested to see what you're going to say about that. Okay, and it's kind of as I expected. Most organizations have not. You can see they've said, I'm not sure. But, a nice healthy 23% said, yes, we have. So congratulations to those of you who have done that. That's a good use of your time. And again, it's not a task that adds any great value, if you will, to the accounts payable function. So let somebody else do it. It's like cleaning your refrigerator. If somebody else wants to do it, let them. Okay. Now, we talked about a lot of different strategies today. As I explained at the beginning, in my view, these are a lot of singles, not a lot of, there's no one home run, but, 3 or 4 singles, I guess you need. 4 singles gets you a home run. So little by little, you want to whittle away at the inefficient practices that are in your accounts payable department, making the group more and more efficient. So what do? Okay, so we went through a lot of stuff, and you probably have made some notes about things that you would like to do. Now, the first thing that I recommend is that you divide it up and you pick off the ones that I call are quick hits. They may not be the ones that will give you the most bang for your buck, if you will, but the things that you can do really quickly and simply. So go ahead and do them. It'll give you this sense of accomplishment. Oh, look, we did three of the 8 things. Look, we're almost halfway done, when you're really not, but you want to get those quick hits out of the way, mainly because they're easy and there's no reason not to do them, and they will bring some benefit to your organization. Then after that, you have the things that you're left with. And you want to divide that into 3 groups. First of all, if there is anything that I talked about today that you're not doing, that you feel leaves a hole in your organization, leaves a hole in your processes, makes you more vulnerable to fraud. So, for example, if you're not verifying all those change of bank account email requests that you're getting, you want to start doing that. But if there's any other thing that we talked about that you're not doing, that you feel leaves your organization vulnerable, then you want to put that at the top of the list and get to it as quickly as you can. After that, you want to break your things down into the nice to-dos and when and if we have time, which, if you're like most people, that means never. But you want to do as many of them as you can, okay? But get the quick hits done right away. And then if there are any gaping holes, you want to do them as quickly as you can. Now, I've gone through the 17 that I've identified. I want to, ask you to think. Really what I'm trying to do is get you to think about this right now. Are there any other tactics that you could use that would make your organization more efficient? Some of them may be industry specific, and some of them just are not. But there's, I probably could have come up with 100 tactics if I had to. And there may be things that hey, we could do this, we could do that. And you want to make a list of them, and then you want to implement them as quickly as you can. And of course, I love to hear from you about what they are. Now, next polling question, and then I think I have my closing remarks. Do you have an active or upcoming AP initiative? Okay. And of course, there can be a lot of different things there. I always have a long to-do list of things that I want to do. And it's very satisfying to be able to cross things off. In fact, my sister told me one time that she had her to-do list, and if she did something that wasn't on the to-do list, she added it to the to-do list and crossed it off. Okay. I think we're about done there. So it looks like quite a number of you do have that. And I think there we go. All right, that's good. It's good to know people are thinking and always looking for ways to improve their accounts payable process. And I think, unless I did this wrong, which is quite possible, do you want to, I'm going to go back to Sam. You want to
Awesome.
talk about North Star, or you want to just do
Great.
questions?
Yeah, right before we jump into Q&A here, I just want to say thanks a ton, Mary. This was a incredible presentation. You shared some great new ways and some overlooked older ones that can boost AP's functions, productivity. So, and then
Mhm.
to quickly tie this into North Star before we, jump into Q&A here. North Star can also boost AP productivity by empowering your team to take ownership of their processes, documents, and communications with the simplicity of self-service. It helps streamline your AP payment processes with an automated accounts payable solution configured to your specific business needs. And finally, we maintain compliance, reduce your AP team's workload to ensure that payments are made accurately and on time. Awesome. Yeah, so let's jump into some Q&A here.
Okay.
We did have a few questions come in. Let me pull it
Okay.
up. So question number one is, what can we do if vendors continue to send duplicate copies of invoices?
So I like to, I'm a great believer in you can catch more flies with honey than you can with vinegar. But at the end of the day, if the honey doesn't work, and I try real hard to make the honey work, watch out because the vinegar could be. So what I would do is if, I had talked to somebody, I talked to them several times, they continue to, send 3 or 4 copies of the invoice, I would go back to them and I would say, look, and this, make sure, by the way, management will back you up on this. I would go back and say to them, look, at our company, we have what we call an ACT list, which I call always check thoroughly list. And these are vendors who routinely send us multiple copies of the same invoice. And, while we want to pay you in a timely manner, we also have to make sure that we don't make duplicate payments. Okay. That's, an initiative from our CFO or a board, whoever you want to say. And I would say, if you continue to send duplicate copies of the same invoice, we're going to have to put you on our ACT list, and that is going to delay your payment. We're not threatening to delay your payment, but we're saying that second check that we're going to put you through, and I would do it, by the way, that second check just delays payment by a few days. So we know you want to get paid on time. We know you want to get paid as soon as possible, but we're going to have to put you on this naughty list. Don't call it that. Call it the always check thoroughly list. But really, they're trying to, they want to get paid. You want to make sure you don't pay twice. So you be polite, be nice about it, but tell them this is not going to get you processed quicker, but it's going to delay payment. And really, all they want is to be paid. If
Great.
they're honorable. If they're trying to get you to pay twice, that's a different story.
Awesome. Next question here is, what should we do if management is not agreeing to implement a best practice?
So if first of all, you're walking a very delicate tightrope here. You need to, if they're not implementing a best practice, whatever it is, you need to figure out what the potential pitfalls are. We could make a duplicate payment, fraud could slip through, etc., and just go through them, and then very diplomatically, you need to point that out to them, but very diplomatically. And sometimes you're going to point something out, and they're going to say, they're not going to agree with you. Now, the next step happens. They don't implement the best practice. You've won them that XYZ is going to happen. XYZ does happen. Again, you have to be extremely diplomatic. And I've seen people end up big time with egg on their face when they go back and they say, I told you that we would get hit with fraud. Now they're hit with fraud. Okay, wrong way to handle it. But then you might want to go back and say, this is terrible, such and such happened. Maybe if and whatever the best practice is, you recommend it again. As much as you're dying to say, I told you to do this 6 months ago, don't. That's hard, but don't. You want to hold on to your job. All right.
She just had a question come in back to duplicates.
Yeah.
So the question is, have you had to deal with duplicate vendor names in your vendor master? These could be variations in the vendor name or spelling or DBAs or AKA.
Yes. Okay. So I could talk for a long time on this topic. It's a really good question. So the answer here is, remember when I was talking about your coding standards? Okay. You need to use a coding standard around the master vendor file, and you need to address every possible little issue, punctuation, even things like when I put a name in and when I put an individual's name in, be it for expense reporting or maybe some of your consultants. Do I put in first name first or last name first? Because if you put in Mary Schaeffer and then you put in Schaeffer Mary, when you do that search, it's going to turn up as two different entities. That's number one. Our next thing I want to do is the DBAs or the AKAs. Okay, your staff, when they do 1099s, is going to pull that information from the master vendor file. And if you do not have their legal name in the if you don't have the legal name in that first field, it's going to pull the DBA onto the 1099 and you're going to get a B notice. Okay, so for that reason, always use the 1099, the legal name in the first field. If you have an extra space for DBAs or AKAs, then you can use it there. But when you set up the vendor in the master vendor file, always use the legal name in the first position. And many vendor files will only have room for one name, so you won't have it. But really, that's why it makes such a big deal, even though it sounds like you're a control freak about you've got to use these coding standards. Everybody's got to use it. Not only when you set it up, not only do you set it up, but then periodically go and check and make sure people are using it and they haven't introduced their own shortcuts. Okay.
Perfect. Well, I know we're coming up on time here. I believe those are actually all the questions we had from the field. So thanks a ton for answering those.
Anytime.
Awesome. And just thanks everyone for attending. And thank you again, Mary, for the presentation.
Thank you for having me.
If anyone is interested in learning more about what's going on at MHC, you can register for our monthly newsletter. That way you'll receive reminders about upcoming webinars and interesting thought leadership content like our webinar today. Our next webinar coming up will include partnership content with Alir, discussing important ways AP and Treasury should be collaborating, and that will be at the end of June. So check out MHC's website or sign up for that newsletter. And again, thanks everyone, and thank you again, Mary.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for great questions.
Awesome. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Have a good afternoon.